Minister, it would be difficult for me to express a greater level of disappointment than I feel on behalf of Canadians today. First of all, this year, we have a $40 billion deficit. And as you know, I hold you personally responsible, as you are the one who signs the checks, who releases the money from the Government of Canada. Secondly, we received this report from the Parliamentary Budgetary Officer regarding the $500 million. The two greatest line items, Minister, are lapsed funds and departmental reserves. Hardly new savings, hardly a safe place for Canadians, Minister. And then, Minister, we know, of course, today that you released these guidelines, because apparently your guidelines of October 5th, 2023 didn't work, because we also received in the media today the news of $5 million in the first wave, only the first wave of fraudulent billing found in contracting. We know what's been going on with Arrive Scam and GC Strategies. We know what's been going on with Dalian. I want you to tell Canadians today how many federal employees are also collecting contracts with the federal government. Give me that number, please. How many federal employees are also collecting contracts with the federal government? Do you have that number for me today?
There is an RCMP investigation relating to the employees, as mentioned by Minister Duclos. And in addition, we have a call out through the Comptroller General's office for a cross-government comprehensive list of items as requested in your question.
We don't know the number. We don't know the number right now of how many federal employees are double dipping, who have these jobs with the federal government and are also collecting funds through contracts with the federal government. Minister, my next question is, can you identify within the $5 million, which was announced today in the media by Bill Curry in the Globe and Mail, how much of that is attributed to Arrive Scam? How much of the $5 million is involved in the Arrive Scam scandal?
Those items, on my understanding, they do not fall under my purview, do not relate to the supplier you mentioned.
For all the money, you must have an idea. You must have an idea.
I responded to the question by saying that they are not related, the items that you mentioned.
I think Canadians would think that they are related because it is money going out of the Treasury Board, of which you are the president. $5 million, we understand, was just the first wave. Can you tell Canadians today how much more can we expect of this? How much in the second wave, third wave, fourth wave, fifth wave? How much more will we see in addition to this $5 million, which has been fraudulent?
Actually,
billing?
the Auditor General pointed out that the rules exist to address any situations in the public service of this nature, and generally speaking, they are followed. But in the case of ArriveCan and the CBSA, they were not, and that's exactly what I and Jean-Yves Duclos announced today, that we are taking measures to ensure that the public service adhered to their responsibilities under the Directive on Conflict of Interest, as well as the Manager's Guide to Professional Services, which we are updating to ensure that there is value for money for the Canadian taxpayer every single time.
Yeah. What's also concerning, Minister, is that if you look at these numbers, they actually predate the pandemic. They go back to 2018. So this would actually be major fraud that's been occurring within your government since 2018. Can you confirm that this is even pre-pandemic? This isn't related to what was necessary in critical times, but goes back to pre-pandemic. Can you confirm that, please?
I will not dispute what the Auditor General or the PBO officer is referring to in their respective reports. What I am doing from a Treasury Board perspective is taking a proactive approach to ensure that we have the rules in place so that public servants have the oversight and the accountability necessary.
I would say that is far more reactive. Now, the Department of National Defence say that there are no rules, and I will, of course, remind the Canadian public that this was the station you held prior to being in this position, no rules stopping a federal government employee in having contracts with the government. Now, as the Treasury Board president, can you say that this is the policy of the federal government? Is that the policy of the federal government?
Actually, that is absolutely false. The Section 7.1 of the Directive on Conflict of Interest
Why is it occurring?
Says that there are consequences for non-compliance. Anyone employed in the federal government that hasn't complied with the requirements of the Directive on Conflict of Interest can be terminated. So there's a requirement to disclose conflicts, and if they are not disclosed or if the disclosure is inadequate, they can be fired.
Well, as key minister for this portfolio, for overseeing this, have you asked your officials how many employees would possibly be in this position?
Of course, I'm concerned with all federal public servants. We have about 300,000 such public servants, and many of them are unionized. And I work closely with all deputy ministers across departments through my officials to ensure that there's compliance with the rules. That is the role that Treasury Board will continue to play. And where there's not, there should be consequences. And that's what we are doing by updating the manager's guide on professional services.
I'll close with